Now, I want to read you this for a reason. When we think of Christian martyrs, there are certain countries that do not come to mind. Now, regardless, this is going to have a highly Catholic influence, this article, but I'm going to read it to you. The arrival of the Christian missionaries, Anglican and Catholic, set the stage for new developments and marked a turning point in the religious life of the people of Buganda, as well as the political structure of the kingdom and the region at large. The history of Buganda from this point on took a different turn. A social revolution that was to transform all aspects of people's lives had set in, and the events that followed, unpredictable as they were, added to the discomfort the new changes that had now been brought about. The untimely death of Mutisa I in 1884, just a few years after the arrival of the missionaries, left the kingdom in the hands of Mwanga II, a youth whose ruling style fell far short of the charisma and political astuteness of his late father in dealing with the foreigners. Mutisa had the astuteness and maturity of dealing with conflicting forces that struggled to influence his court. The Arabs or the Muslims, the Catholics, the French, or the Protestants, the English, operated, of course, not without constraint, with some minimal success during his reign. He led his subjects of all ranks to join in any creed of their choice. The Arabs also, having seen the Christian missionaries' efforts to convert the local people, also diligently started to teach Islam. There was a competitive struggle among the preachers of the new creeds, each attempting to assert more influence and recognition among the most influential officials in the inner circle of the king's court. The king himself never committed to any single creed. The Muslims denounced him for his refusal to be circumcised, and he could not be baptized in the Christian denominations because he did not want to give up polygamy. He died still a traditionalist in his culture. The Christian religion was received with much excitement by the converts, but it came down with its own requirements. It denounced all the native religious behavior and practices as heathen and satanic. Therefore, joining it meant a commitment to break away from the old lifestyle, make and adopt new alliances, to adjust to a new moral and religious standard, also adherences and allegiances. The new flock of believers, or absomi, or readers as they were called, therefore, were seemingly regarded as rebels who had transferred their loyalty to the new religious system, thus abandoning the old tribal traditions. Now, although I have to say this right because I'm damaging somebody's name here, although Mwanga had shown some love for the missionaries as a young prince, his attitude changed when he became king. The once lively and enthusiastic prince in support of the missionaries turned into an intolerant and vicious persecutor of Christians and all foreigners. He felt with good cause that the powers and authority that his predecessors had enjoyed were dwindling and had disintegrated under the influence of missionaries and their converts. The converts had diverted their loyalty to some other authority, and their allegiance at all costs could no longer be counted on. So the ultimate humiliation was the insolence he received from the pages when they, the least subservient of servants, resisted his homosexual advances. According to old tradition, the king was the center of power and authority. He could dispense with any life as he felt, hence the old saying, and I guess I have to read it, it's in their language, Nambusa alya kunzwai. I'm sorry for any people listening in Uganda if I have damaged your language. By the way, there's plenty of people that call from Uganda. I hate to tell you that. The queen, this is what it translates to, the queen ant feeds on her subjects. Although homosexuality is abhorred among Baganda, it was unheard of for mere pages to reject the wishes of a king. It's alleged that the king learned or acquired homosexual behavior from the Arabs. So given these conflicts, he was determined to rid his kingdom of the new teaching and its followers. It was hardly a year after he took the throne, he ordered the execution of Yusufu, that is Joseph Regurama, and they're going to list all the names, so I'm going to skip them. But these are the first 3 Christian martyrs who were killed at Bisega Natate, January 31st, 1885. You say, why am I reading you this? Because it caught my attention that this type of martyrdom is not limited. We think, we have a one-track mind. We think this could only happen here. This could only happen here. But if you think about it, this is behavior that's happened all over the world, and it's pretty much the same behavior. Hated for no reason and killed for no reason except the cause of Christ. In October of 1885, the Anglican bishops James Hannington recently dispatched to head the Eastern Equatorial Africa headquartered in Buganda, was murdered at Busogo on his way to Buganda. Mwanga had ordered his death, and Hannington's crime was to attempt to come to Buganda through Bugosa, a shorter route than that he had employed earlier visitors who took a route from the south of Lake Victoria. Buganda's kings regarded Busoga as the back door to Buganda and thought that anyone coming through the back door must have evil intentions towards the kingdom. Anyway, in a nutshell, if you want to know, this particular leader basically goes on a rampage, and the list, I have the list here, the names are all typical, but it tells you how they died, how they were killed. A complete list of the martyrs is given below. 45 known Catholic and Protestant martyrs include those who could only formally be accounted for. Many more murders went unreported without a record. But if you read the manner that they were martyred, dismembered and burned, dismembered and burned, dismembered and burned, beheaded and burned, speared, beheaded, beheaded, dismembered, beheaded. It's really not a very rich, except for a few here: castrated, castrated, dismembered, castrated, speared, ravaged by wild dogs. But you can see, it seems like if we lived in this particular region and we were only reading this, we'd say, this must be germane to this area and just part of the culture not receiving, or an angry king. But the treatment of these people for their faith, and I didn't read the rest of the story, but it's self-explanatory. They would not recant their beliefs. They were going to stay the course. They would not give way to what the king wanted them to do, which they felt was against what they had learned as followers of Christ. But this particular pattern plays itself out on the world stage everywhere. So when we read of the martyrs, when we read of, and I picked up this volume this morning to read from you, this Bloomfield's Martyrs, you really get a picture that this is pretty much, and it's the same type of thing. Why not just kill somebody and put them in a pit? But we have to burn them, we have to dismember them, we have to decapitate them. I want you to see that hatred that must destroy is a hatred that was seen all over the regions of Europe. If you're reading the history, I mentioned Huss and Jerome of Prague, and we talked about the English Reformation and the martyrs in Italy and the martyrs in France, and you start to think, wow, I never stopped to think how many martyrs, but the pattern of their martyrdom is really what is staggering, because it's the same angry hatred pursuing these men who were, or women who were, willing to express and stay true to the faith they had received. Not only is their martyrdom, the pattern the same, that they wouldn't recant, but the way of hatred towards their belief, that same pattern is peppered all across you look at every single country chronicling its martyrs, and you'll see the same pattern is there. Now, if you can explain that to me, because it would make perfect sense that in one part of the earth they might be martyred one way and another, but pretty much this is the pattern: destroy, just absolutely destroy, burn, eradicate. And then you know that the same forces of evil permeate the earth through history and still today. They may be lessened, by the way, but don't think they're eradicated. They'll only be eradicated when he comes, the picture we know and we anticipate, when he comes again as King of Kings, Lord of Lords, coming to rule and reign. Now, some people may say, well, that's irrelevant to me. It doesn't have any impact on me. It should, because in our modern culture, although we may not have the same way of dealing with things, and we may not see the same things in our culture in America, the same hatred still exists. The world still hating the beloved of Christ. Now, you can take that any way you want, or you can take it and say, I rejoice in that. I didn't come to win friends and try and influence people. I came to preach Christ. And I'm looking for men and women who are willing to follow me as I preach Christ until he comes again, until either we're taken up with him or he returns to get us. That's the criteria for this church, a band of courageous believers willing to get behind me and follow me as I follow Christ. Get on the telephone.